Are you ready for a callback? Good boy, good boy,
Yes!
good boy, good boy. Happy New Comic Book Day, geeks, and welcome to issue 7 of the Script Heroes podcast.
The show where we bring you the comic news, book reviews, and industry blues. My name is Joseph Jasnowski, and I'm the writer of Janitor Hero, Cunning Carly, and the Cryptoverse.
And I'm Katie Markham, scripter of the Rusty Robot Country Club and ghostwriter extraordinaire.
Join us for our polls this week, which are going to be Titans number 6, Beast World number 3, Green Arrow number 7, and GPD number 1.
We're also going to be jumping into Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief, the graphic novel adaptation for a back issue review that was adapted by Robert Vendetti and Attila Futaki.
That's right. And you can follow our podcast on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, all at Script Heroes Pod. You can find my personal socials at JJAZ1111.
And I'm on all socials at Katie Markham Pro.
Okay, without any further ado, let's move on to the news. So for our first piece of news, we're going to be dealing with a creator who we are no stranger to on this podcast, Mr. Daniel Warren Johnson. Image has released a press release for a new, and that's right, Image Central, not Skybound, has released a new press release for a Daniel Warren Johnson comic. And here it is. Hot off the 2023 Eisner-winning Do a Powerbomb and skyrocketing to fame with his fresh spin on Transformers, Daniel Warren Johnson has another balls-to-the-walls adventure for fans in a new print collected edition of his long-running webcomic, Space Mullet. This epic intergalactic tale will be reintroduced to fans, featuring remastered lettering and include an all-new, never-before-printed chapter. It will hit shelves in July 2024 from Image Comics.
Now, I have never heard of Space Mullet. Is this something you've been a fan of?
This is the one Daniel Warren Johnson series I believe I have not read.
I can't
due to it
imagine why
being
you wouldn't
a
have been,
webcomic.
immediately drawn in to something called Space Mullet.
Right? That's a nice title. But I think it's very interesting that they will be printing this, webcomic now in print form. And the real headline for me here is that Daniel Warren Johnson is for the first time doing something through Image Central and not through Skybound, which is an interesting little change in the way that he's released a lot of stuff. I'm guessing it's because with this being an established property that he had already done on webcomics compared to doing something new, he probably didn't want to give away the ownership that Skybound usually takes when if you're not familiar with the Skybound deal, it's usually a 50-50 split between Skybound and the creators.
Yeah, that would make a lot of sense, for sure, if that's the case. Well, do you know anything about Space Mullet? Because I'm not going to lie, my little strange Saturday Super Show senses are tingling.
Yeah, so I'm glad you asked. This sci-fi webcomic is about a washed-up ex-Marine space trucker and his alien partner trying to do good in the galaxy. It ran from 2012 to 2017 on Johnson's own website. It had been released in Dark Horse in 2016 in a collected edition, but this one will, as I mentioned, have a new kind of extra chapter. But yeah,
and
sounds quite fun
lettering.
And wacky. The cover is extremely wacky.
I would love for you to tell me about the cover.
Oh man, you want me to try to describe the cover? Okay,
yes,
there's like a dude. There's two humanoid-looking people, like a dude in the middle holding a gun and a really, really angry, like teeth out face. There's a woman who's kind of just looking off into the distance to his left. To his right, there's a dude who looks to be in like prison pants, kind of. But he's very alien-esque. He's got like a gray face and like wrinkles on his throat. His pants look like a jumpsuit. He's wearing like a normal jacket, but like they're orange. He's wearing these orangey pants that kind of give me prison vibes. There's a huge dude in the middle who does not have any discernible facial features. He's got like just kind of like a rounded head and then like a big like kind of like a cylindrical thing coming over, like what kind of is maybe a mouth. And then there's a goblin looking dude hanging onto his back, like a traditional green looking goblin.
And how many of them have mullets?
None. Maybe the main dude does. The main dude does, I think. It kind of blends into his t-shirt. I think the main dude, the main like human looking dude, looks
and
like
there's nothing more mullet than that.
Yeah. So, yeah, there you go. There's your word picture. They're on like some sort of space planet, and there's like stars in the background. I don't know. It looks like fun. I think this will be a fun time.
Agreed.
It maybe is going to be a strange Saturday Super Show pick. We'll see. but I think that could be fun.
Absolutely. What else you got for us today?
So our next little bit of news is for all the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle fans like me that we have listening. IDW has done their free comic book day solicitations for this year, and it sees the return of a fan favorite Turtles character for the first time in 17 years. They have solicited that Nightwatcher will be appearing in the free comic book day comic. For those not familiar with Nightwatcher, he was an alter ego of Raphael from the 2007 Ninja Turtles film. But if you've read the prequel comics, he inherits this mantle from a vigilante by the name of David Merriweather. It would be my assumption that it's not going to be Raphael in the comic, and it will probably be David Merriweather. But big news for Turtle fans, especially those of our age that grew up with the 2007 film and love Nightwatcher.
Now
Katie, you are not a
maybe
huge Turtles fan.
here's the thing.
Yeah.
It feels disingenuous to say I'm not a Turtles fan. I have
I
simply
said a
not
huge Turtles fan.
engaged
Yeah.
with Turtles beyond the like 4 Kids programming of random, I think it was like the 1998 cartoon or something that would get the super outdated reruns on our little
To the 2003
local
show.
2003 show. That would it would get reruns and we would see it every so often. But yeah, the Turtles were not a part of my life. But since
Very
becoming
sad.
pals with Jay, they have wormed their way in, which I'm not complaining about. One of my friends has also been binge watching, I think, every single Turtles show.
I did that like a little while ago now, like a year and a half ago, I think. I think I was bothering you all the time when I was going through I should say most of the shows. I've not watched Rise yet. Blasphemy, but
Yeah, I enjoy all of the Turtles content that I see. I read the Batman and Ninja Turtles crossover when we became friends because we wouldn't
which
stop
if you,
talking
if,
about the
yeah,
Turtles.
yeah. If you're not aware, I have I don't think ever said it on the pod, but on many occasions I've been quoted as saying I think Batman and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is the greatest comic book crossover ever done because it's so good.
And I mean, they make so much sense together. You wouldn't think it, but they
It's so
do.
good.
Uh,
No, it works.
but yeah, I am frankly surprised that in the what now 6, 7 episodes we've done that there hasn't been a turtle book, and that's
I keep thinking
certainly
about
going to
doing it.
change soon. I would think.
I think we'll do either a bonus episode or a back issue review on Last Ronin at some point. Like, that's gonna come up, I think. I don't think we're gonna go too long without that. I debated every single time it's my turn to pick, but I'm waiting for the right moment.
That's fair. That's fair. And I am thrilled for that moment to come because I am very excited to become a shellhead myself.
Yes. Fantastic. Well, without any further ado, would you like to move into the polls for the week?
Let's do it. All right, folks, here we are at the pull list rec. This week we've got quite the DC heavy lineup. We have Titans Beast World number 3, Titans number 6, and Green Arrow number 7 from DC, as well as GPD number 1 from Godhood Comics. But that's, of course, not all we picked up this week. Jaybird, what did you get?
Okay, we've got the Action Comics Annual, the Alan Scott Green Lantern series number 3, Batman Beyond Neo Gothic number 6, Dust 5, Duke 1, Edenwood number 3, and No One number 7.
Quite the grab. Yeah, I also grabbed Coda number 4. I also grabbed Edenwood number 3. And there was a wonderful little facsimile of
I had
the new
seen
Teen
that.
Titans number 1, which feels like as good a time as any to flex that I have a true copy of number 1, signed by George Perez.
That's why I didn't pick up. I don't typically pick up facsimiles for books that I actually own, which is why I didn't grab it.
That's fair. I like when they do the facsimiles, so I will happily buy them. But yeah, fair. Of the common pulls between us, what would you like to talk about?
I feel like we lump by publisher. I think that's been established at this point. So I feel like
Yes.
we should start with GPD. Then I'm going to say go into the Double Titans books and finish with Green Arrow.
Sounds like a plan to me. Let's mosey on over to GPD. All right, GPD #1 from Godhood Comics. Sergeant Selim Inanu and her team of rookie space cops struggle to maintain order in a lawless and chaotic Milky Way. But where there are police, there's bound to be corruption. That is coming to us from writer Tyler F. Martin, art by Bruna Abdias, colors by Ifandia Noor, letters by Letter Squids. We should also point out we were sent digital copies of this comic for free with the intent to review. So shout out Godhood for that. If you want to get your own copies of GPD, you can go to godhoodcomics.com/shop to get your copy.
Yeah.
But Jay, what did you think of GPD?
Yeah, let me start by saying thank you to our friends at Godhood. It's always awesome to get, free comics. So, big thanks.
Yeah.
This is a fun book. It's an interesting book. I always have mixed opinions on a first issue that is straight up just an origin,
Mm-hmm.
like that doesn't really have a story beyond the origin, especially when then we kind of jump to like without going into too heavy spoilers, the origin is fairly disconnected from the story that seems
It
to be
is.
going to be happening after. So I'm a little torn on that when it's like looking at the work as a whole, but I do think it's a fun origin. I really like the aesthetic and like the kind of the looks of the different aliens. Um the I think the like narration captions are done well, which is
Mm-hmm.
always a tough thing to do. So that definitely makes it land a little bit. I think it's very slow at the beginning. I feel like it takes like 10 to 12 pages before it gets good, and then it gets
Mm-hmm.
good, and then I'm like, okay, now, but I feel like we have a little bit of wasted space at the beginning of this issue. After that, I think it really starts running. The characters actually start getting characterization. There's a
Mm-hmm.
fantastic like moral conversation in like anger before the fight between Lee and Call that I think I actually when I first saw that page I immediately made a comment in my notes of like there's way too many caption bubbles on this page, and then I read it and I'm like, oh no, but that's a good argument, like that's a good comic book argument. So yeah, it's fun. It's a solid first issue, but I would have liked to see it a little more tied into where the actual story is going to be.
Yeah, and with that as well, it is an origin story for Salam, who's going to be our protagonist, an Earth girl who's been adopted into this space cop force. But the first, I don't know, third half of the book is a part of her origin that she has no control over. It is these aliens coming to Earth to find an item, and she's kind of just a bystander as we watch her origin story unfold. And we focus a lot on Lee, who ends up becoming her mentor and her father figure, who I'm a big fan of. But I do think that
Yeah,
with the book ending up being about her, and she has some captioning going on through that first
yeah,
third half of the book. I do think it was a little too much story that wasn't connected to our story, kind of like what
I
you were
agree.
saying. Yeah.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. It definitely like I don't know why. I guess I didn't really look at the cover closely before I went into reading the book, which is a weird thing to do. But I was just, I was ready to get into it. I knew I was reading it regardless, so wasn't really looking that close to the cover. I just assumed Lee was the main character until like a third of the way through the book, and then I was like, oh. And then we get two different time jumps in this,
Hmm.
and I'm like, I don't think the first one's necessary if we're gonna go there, or just have it take place where the first one is. Like, there's back to back time jumps that are really fast. Feels a little
Yeah.
bit just even more unfocused to me. And that's the thing.
Right.
Like, I enjoy almost every part of this book. I just wish we picked one of the things to focus on.
Agree.
If that makes sense.
But I do want to say, you were talking about the alien designs. I think a lot of
Yeah.
the sci-fi elements in this are done really well by the artist here.
Yeah.
Uh, just a really clearly they know what they want to have on the page, so like you really don't see any sort of inconsistencies between them, even for these more backgroundish characters. It's like, yes, you can tell that this character has a design. They're not just, or even this ship, the bridge, they have designs and they know what they want to have on the page, which I think is
Yeah.
always really good, especially in something where you're looking at the unfamiliar.
Full agree. I really like the art in this book. The
Mhm.
action sequences are really good. There's some nice, like experimenting with layouts
Mhm.
that works out really well. Um, it's a fun first issue, and I think here's the thing I'll say. I think the concept is really strong too.
Mhm.
So like, I'm very interested in where we're going with this.
Yeah, I
But
do want
I
to
don't know
tack
if you want
on.
to. Yeah,
Yeah, I want
yeah,
to tack
yeah.
one more
Go on.
thing on before
Yeah,
we
yeah,
jump
yeah.
into our ratings.
Yes, yes.
We've seen this lettering before with
I
Vector's from
complimented
Scout
it
Comics.
before.
You did, and I really didn't like it in Vector's, and I again not a fan of it here. Too many just like special effects on the regular lettering for me, like when you're shouting or in like really important moments, having those
Yeah,
emphasized words and letters makes a lot of sense.
yeah.
But when it's constant, they just lose their punch in those bigger moments.
I will agree. I think it's over. I think this is a worse example than or like like it is worse than this than in Vectors in my opinion, because there's no like even picking. It's just like the last word of every single bubble, so it gets super repetitive. That being said, I do still think it looks really good. I just wish that it was
Yeah,
saved for
the
like those
effects are
like
done
you mentioned.
well.
Yeah, and like the it's calls lettering when he like once he turns and he has like those red bubbles. I really like
Yeah.
that.
And we have
But yeah,
a few cool like effects on the bubbles that characters do when you have particular emotions happening.
yeah,
But I just find it really distracting how often there are these
yeah.
special letterings in not special situations.
I agree, but let's I think let's get into the ratings now. I think we've
Yeah,
kind
let's
of hit
jump
on
into it.
everything of the book. Like I said,
Mhm.
I enjoyed this. It needs focus to be a top tier book, but it is a good first issue, and it is first issue that makes me interested in reading the series. So with that note, I'm gonna give it a 7 out of 10. I think it's a good first issue, and I will give it a pull list rec. I think this is worth a read to see if it's your kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that the disconnected origin with the kind of disconnected story that we get to does suffer the book a bit because it feels kind of directionless. It does set up very nicely for the next issue, and I am certainly going to be checking the next issue out as well. I didn't go quite as high because I also do have that big problem with the lettering that just has been consistent with this lettering studio. I gave it a 5 out of 10. I think that it's a good start. I think the art is really, really strong. Like you were saying, a lot of the movement and action character designs are really, really good. But I do think that it's a little rough as a first issue to kind of not have gotten those wheels under us for the plot.
Okay, want to move on to Beast World?
Let's move on to Beast World. Are you ready for a callback? Good boy, good boy,
Yes.
good boy, good boy, good boy, good
You know
boy.
this is gonna be short now, right?
It's a callback, baby.
uh, okay, moving on to Titans Beast World number 3. Can Amanda Waller bring order to a world gone wild? The world has gone wild, and Amanda Waller is the only one who can bring order. The mastermind behind the Suicide Squad has now been given frightening authority to deal with the threat at large. She knows what is needed to end this, but will her brutal methods put her to a collision course with the Titans? The writer is, of course, Tom Taylor, Nightwing, Injustice. You know who he is. The artist is Lucas Meyer, worked on Night Terror's Punchline and Grim Fairy Tales. Colors are Romula Fajardo Jr., and letters are the immensely talented Wes Abbott. Katie, Titans Beast World number 3. What are your thoughts?
I'm glad that there's more Beast World in this Beast World than our previous Beast World. Because my big problem with number 2 was that we were too focused on like Dick and Bruce, which is like my favorite thing in the world, but also it's an event book. Please do event things. We got a lot more event coverage in this. We got to focus in on Donna and Starfire, on the flashes. Of course, there was a healthy dose of Nightwing, as well as some like Power Girl and a little bit of Superman and some stuff with Garo, which I think is what was really, really missing
I agree with that.
previously.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but
So
but
I was a fan of it.
yeah, yeah. What I will say is I agree with you to some extent, but I think some of the event plot moved very slowly and was fairly useless. I'm actually going to say the Nightwing story in particular I felt was extremely weak in this
I
book.
agree.
I I feel like we're furthering even more the Beast rules not being consistent, but I guess we're just,
Mhm.
maybe we should stop mentioning that because we mention
Just
it in
where we
every
live
Beast
now.
world we
Yeah.
cover on that. I do agree that Garl returning is really nice. Let me first say I think the scene with Donna with the lasso and Garl really really strong. Donna gets some nice moments in here. I am like continually confused by the Black Adam thing where they're like, no, it's you can't go after Black Adam because if you two turn, that's even worse. And I'm like, what is the power scaling? Is Donna more powerful than Black Adam? Is that a thing? I don't
Because
know.
theoretically,
Anyway,
the starfish will jump out of whoever is currently hosting them to go into someone more
yeah,
powerful.
yeah,
And
yeah.
like, I guess maybe it
Like
feels like a
Starfire. I can
very
kind of buy.
depending on the lore type of
Yeah, I
move.
just
Or
know
like,
Black Adam has been like recently treated as like a near Superman level power, so I was like, feels a
yeah, I
little
feel
odd
like
to me.
he's been a little bit of a patsy in this entire event.
Yeah.
Um, like it just feels like the threat of characters being beasted just never feels, it feels like it should be scary. The characters clearly see it as a scary thing, but every time we've seen a character get beasted, they're like handled pretty easily.
Or they're somehow still good, or there's like turned into a pet, or there's 18 different things that happen and none of them really seem to be all that bad. So
Exactly. With the
that's the tough thing
exception,
about.
I think, if I remember correctly, of Power Girl. We see her in this
Ooh,
issue.
I
If you
really
remember
like that, by the
from,
way.
I really like the Power Girl a lot, and I would have liked
Yeah,
it so much better if it was after that we read that middle story from World Tour, or that first story from World Tour Metropolis.
yeah, yeah,
Like the Power Girl moment was such a good moment. It was such a good, like, scary. This character is being beasted. Like the we have a
yeah,
code K to Oracle, like a
yeah.
Kryptonian being turned into a beast.
I also wish it was followed up on more in this issue. It feels like it happens and
Hmm.
then it's just kind of gone.
Yeah,
Which I get that they were
agreed.
handling a lot of different plot lines in this, but that was so impactful that just kind of dropping it felt very off. And like that's the thing. Like I agree with you that this is more focused on the event, but this book is less focused in general. Like it's
Yeah,
very all over the place.
agreed. But I do give it points for being more focused on the event than previously. Do we want to
Which
hop
is fair.
into ratings?
Sure. Do you want to go first on this one?
I can happily go first. Yeah, I like this better than issue 2 as an event book. I liked it less as issue 2 as an I'm reading it book. But yeah, I think that it added some cool stuff. We got some maybe slow and superficial movement, but a little bit of movement on the plot. I gave this a 6.5, which is the same as number 2, because I think where it succeeded as an event book, it did fail more
I forgot that you
as
gave
the
issue
regular
two
book.
that low of a rating.
Yeah.
Honestly, I'm gonna continue to be above you on Beast World because I am still enjoying the event as a whole. I did take this down a little bit from issue 2 just because I agree with you that it functions within the event better, but I do think it is a worse reading experience. I do want to mention that I think the artist is extremely talented,
Yes, yeah,
especially
taking
like
over
stuff
for
like
Ivan
that
Reese.
Phoenix. Yeah, especially things like that Phoenix Power Girl
Hmm.
thing just looked so nice. There's a lot of really cool stuff in that realm in this. I'm gonna give it a 7.5 out of 10. Still a really good read, but I feel like issue by issue, I'm just kind of getting a little bit less, interested in where we're going here.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, you want to move on to the main Titans title for the week?
Let's do it. Me. This is real. This is me. It's Camp Rock.
I thought you didn't have cable.
I didn't, but I had a DVD player and relatives who didn't know me very well. Ahem. Titans, number 6. Titans against Brother Eternity. As the world is overrun by beasts, the Titans face the man who put it all in motion, Brother Eternity. But the cult leader might not be what he appears to be. What shocking secret does Brother Eternity hold? And will Starfire survive it? This is yet again from Tom Taylor of Nightwing, Injustice, and of course Beast World renown. The artist here is Travis Moore, who has also done Nightwing and some Wonder Woman. The colors are from Tamra Bonvillian, and the letters are yet again Wes Abbott.
Yeah.
I'll kick us off with this. From a Titan series that I've been a bit disappointed in lately, I liked this issue. I was so glad
I
to see
might
it.
go a little bit further. I love this issue. I thought this was a really good issue. Yeah, this was a really Starfire. We've complained and complained and complained about the lack of focus of Starfire throughout Titans. Man, we pull it back around here. Um,
Right?
I'm sorry. What's the artist's name again? On this
Travis
book,
Moore.
Travis Moore does a phenomenal job capturing like the George Perez aesthetic for
Hmm.
Tamaran and Starfire. Like you feel that immediately. There's so much of like the new team or the Tales of the Titans Starfire like feel in this book. The OG Tales of the Titans Starfire,
Yes.
not the one that was a few months ago. It ties into both the event and the solo series really well. Um, there's really strong characterization across the board. I feel like there's a good internal story within this
Hmm.
issue that comes full circle. Um, yeah, I just think this really feels like you're traveling back to the new Teen Titans era. Like it has that vibe, it has that strong characterization, and I really enjoyed it across the board.
Me too. Like you were saying, it's got some great internal things going on. Like you have a very specific plot for a couple of groups of people that I think is really successfully conveyed, while also making it feel like it's also connected to the Beast World going ons, as well as the Titans going ons from before Beast World. Like it's really all coming together in this book. My complaint about Titans for the longest time was that it felt like it was building to something that it was never getting to, and I think we're with number 6 and going on with this the royal blood plot line that they're starting. This is what it was building to, and this is when we're really going to hit the gas on the Titans. However, it is worth mentioning, still no love for our beloved Cyborg. Like
I
in the
feel so
event
bad.
and in the Titans book, our boy is just completely erased.
Man, the dude gets nothing. He gets like one panel a book. It's
Yeah.
real rough. He's the definition of just there, and it's
Yep.
very upsetting. I'm glad that Starfire's come around. I really hope Cyborg comes around and gets his moment to shine soon. But I agree. I think that's a little upsetting. There's like I feel like there's a little bit of a moment in the middle of this book where it kind of deviates a little bit from its focus. With
Mm-hmm.
like the detective chimp bit and that I don't hate it. But yeah, it just feels like for something that was so Starfire centric, when we have that like full circle stuff, like this
Mm-hmm.
feels a little bit off to the side, but it does some world building for the event and such, so I don't absolutely hate it. It's just a little thing that in my mind keeps it from being this like awesome
Mm-hmm.
one kind of not necessarily standalone, but issue on its own that also ties into the event.
Yeah, I didn't mind the detective chimp part. I think that it uh probably the fact that this is the Titans book and Beast World is a Titans event means that they should cram more event stuff in here for sure, while also focusing on a Titan story. And I think they did that really well, specifically with the Detective Chimp part and the arrival of Garth. Uh, so I didn't mind it. I do think that was the weakest part, but it was the weakest part in a pretty strong book. Uh, so I'm ready to jump into
Agreed.
ratings if you are.
Yeah. I can start us off here. I think I've already basically given my recap of my overall thoughts. So I'm not gonna
Yeah.
bore you by driving those home again. But I gave this an 8.5 out of 10.
Ooh.
I really enjoyed this issue, and I do think it's something you can just jump into. So I will call this a pull list rec. It gives you the needed context.
Yeah. I gave this an 8. I think that part of that might be my harboring resentment from the 5 issues leading up to it, because it is a really strong issue. I think it connects to the event super well. I'm psyched to keep going with the story that we're seeing here. Yeah, 8 out of 10 for me. Also a poll list rec from me.
First official poll list rec of the week. Love to see it. In Green Arrow number 7, Oliver Queen is back. He's returned with his family to the present day, but the Green Arrow family reunion is just getting started. Green Arrow still has lots of secrets to uncover, like why has Amanda Waller taken an interest in his family? The writer of this book is, of course, Joshua Williamson. Dark Crisis, Superman. There's two artists on this book: Carmine Di Giadomenico, who's worked on Catwoman and The Flash, and Trevor Hairsine, who worked on Deceased. Colors are Romula Fajardo Jr., and letters are Troy Pettery. Katie, how would you
Yes.
feel about Green Arrow number 7?
So I have enjoyed this series quite a bit. I think that we were. It was a bit confusing for a bit when he was jumping around timelines and multiverses and such. And then it really hit home with issue 6. It had a really nice conclusion there as well as great setup. I wish that we were a bit more focused on that setup. Like, the bulk of this issue is Ollie just like going to visit his friends, and we find out why. And I think that they have a lot of really good sequences within that. Uh, but I do wish that we were focused more on the Roy plot, because that's what I'm like really
Hmm.
excited about is them hunting
Fair,
down
fair.
Roy in that reversal of Roy looking for Ollie. But I
Hmm.
did really like seeing him interact with all the leaguers. I think that was a really nice, I don't know, introduction to a number of relationships.
Yeah,
Um, I thought it was fun. I liked a lot of the art in it as well because we have a number of kind of like low stakes fights going on.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
it does seem a bit odd to have this going on when, I suppose it's just because of the books that I do pull. So many of my other pulls are like, at the very least, having like a Beast World special or something, or like a tie-in.
yeah.
It feels a little odd to talk with the Justice League and to have everything happening with the event, and then have basically no mention of this, especially when Amanda Waller is kind of our bad guy for both of those plots.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm like, I feel like since Green Arrow hasn't popped up in the event at all, I
Mhm.
think that's true. My assumption is that he's returning after it's already been handled. That is my best guess on that. I agree that it's a little bit of a weird time to do a book that's very much like, here's how this ties into the larger DC universe. And it's like, well, actually, the larger DC universe is doing something right now, and this doesn't
Yeah,
really play with that. That being said, I think one of Joshua Williamson's strong points is his knowledge of the DC universe and history, and that's on full display in all of the characters that he writes very
yes,
well in this. As Ollie kind of bounces between them, it's definitely a little bit of an odd issue compared to what came before, what's going on in the universe. But at the same time, it's a good issue. You
agreed.
know, if you're not looking at where it happened, what came, it does a lot of really cool stuff. It reestablishes, Green Arrow for the next arc, which I think is really nice. It's that little
Hmm.
reprieve between arcs, which is a nice thing for creators to do that isn't always done. It has really good emotional stakes. Um, and the main thing I'll say is I feel like it did something that needed to be done a long time ago, and I don't pull every single DC book, so maybe it was done somewhere. But in really looking at, well, what is the Justice League doing right now? Like, why is the
Hmm.
Justice League not formed? Why are the Titans, the main team right now? Like, what is every leaguer thinking about this? That's something that really should be done, and I think it makes sense that Joshua Williamson's the guy to do that because he's the guy who
Right.
destroyed them in Dark Crisis. So it really works in that sense. So I really did like it overall. I agree with I'm a
Me
huge
too.
Roy fan, so obviously I want more Roy. But yeah, I'm not gonna knock this issue too much because I think we can just get there next issue. I like this issue. It has a
Agreed.
good Ollie and Green Lantern and Hal moment, which is one of the best relationships in comic books. So love to see that. Yeah, good stuff across the board. I really enjoyed it for what it was.
Yeah, you ready to hop into ratings?
I am. Do you want to start us off on this one?
I can start us off. I gave this. I was torn between a 7.5 and an 8, so I'll go a full Joseph and make it a 7.75. I think that it has a lot of a lot of really good interactions, a lot of really good character work. Amanda Waller being the bad guy when she's also the bad guy in Beast World did throw me off, but not in a way that like distracted from the book at all. So yeah, really good time. I would actually call this issue a pull list rec. I think you can jump on here and start going with the rest of the series.
I'm going to agree with you very much throughout this. I gave this the full 8 out of 10, but I'm right there with you, and this is absolutely a pull list rec. This is meant, at least it feels meant to be a jumping on point. You
Oh
get
yeah,
the establishment of the world, you get the establishment of Ollie, you get told what just happened and where we're going to be going. It is the perfect jumping on point if you want to get on this Green Arrow series. So it's going to get a very strong pull list rec from me.
gorgeous. Go pull it.
That's another official pull list rec from the
Woo!
Script Heroes.
And that is going to take us to the end of the segment. You ready to talk about Percy Jackson and the Olympians?
I am. Let's get to it. Our back issue review this week is Percy Jackson, the Lightning Thief graphic novel adaptation. Just a quick warning, spoilers are ahead, and they will overlap with, the book and presumably the TV show, so quick warning, we're going to get fully into this. Mythological creatures and the gods of Mount Olympus seem to be walking out of the pages of 12-year-old Percy Jackson's textbooks and into his life. And worse, he's angered a few of them. Zeus's master lightning bolt has been stolen, and Percy is the prime suspect. Now he and his friends have just 10 days to find and return Zeus's stolen property and bring peace to a warring Mount Olympus. Percy Jackson is obviously written and created by Mr. Rick Riordan. The adapted script is by Robert Venditti, Hawkman, Green Lantern. The art is by Attila Futaki, who's done work on Conan. Colors are by Jose Villarubio. Layouts by Ophius Collar, and lettering by Chris Dickey. Katie, how did you feel about the graphic novel adaptation?
I mean, I don't know if you can tell from how much I was cheesing during your summary. Percy Jackson was incredibly important to me as a child. Like, I was in 5th grade when The Last Olympian came out. I was truly the target audience for this. I was just like a little nerdy, bookish kid going wild. I love these books so much. I love the story so much, the characters so much. The graphic novel is fine. um,
Yeah.
I think that I don't want to jump right into. Yeah, I'll jump right into it. One of the strongest aspects of the first 5 Percy Jackson books, because then obviously there's the Heroes of Olympus later, is that they are from Percy's perspective, and that includes a lot of Percy's commentary and thoughts and experiences peppered throughout, which I think is where so much of the charm of the books come from.
Yeah.
And in the comic, I was expecting that there would be like captions that to get us inside Percy's head. I was expecting more of that characterization of Percy, because I think so much of the charm and appeal and nostalgia for the books for me comes from feeling like I was listening to Percy tell me a story. And I think that was really lacking here, and I really felt that void.
Yeah. I'm gonna agree with you on that. So here's what I'll say after I've been on a Percy Jackson tear the past couple of weeks. Reread the book, watched the movie. I'm up to date on the show, and obviously the graphic novel now. So I'm gonna say something that I don't think I realized until consuming all this content. I think Percy Jackson is a hard thing to adapt, even amongst its peers and other things. And I think you hit the nail on the head with it being because of how important Percy's perspective is to it. It's why in I think both the movie and the show you get all these voices in Percy's head, which feels very nonsensical and dumb, but it's just because it's really hard to emulate what getting that close-knit feeling to a character in a novel is. And here's the thing about the graphic novel. I agree that I would have probably expected captions, but man, can captions bog down an adaptation because you have to put so much on there, and there's already so much that has to come out here. The way that I have kind of come to terms with this graphic novel. And I'm going to unbury the lead by giving you kind of an overall perspective right away, is that this is not its own thing. This is a companion piece to the novel. If you read this having not read the novel, you are going to have a bad and confusing time. If you read
Hmm.
this having read the novel, you're going to have a fun time seeing these characters actually kind of come to life and uh, bumble around. I'm going to give you kind of the one example that immediately hit me of like, this does not really 100% work on its own is and there's several moments of this where like we get a payoff with the setup being cut, which
Yeah.
is really weird. And the first moment of that is when Luke gives Percy the shoes and he makes a comment about like, oh, I can't use these, can I? But we've cut the earlier conversation where he learns that he can't fly in the sky, so it just doesn't make any sense in the
Yeah.
graphic novel because the setup was cut.
They try to
But with
patch it a
knowing
little
the
bit.
novel,
They have Chiron say like, probably a good idea for you not to fly or be in the air. But it
yeah, but that
really
comes
doesn't
after
have that.
Percy's already acknowledged the
Exactly. Yeah.
problem, and like, there's no reason that Percy would know it at that point. Like,
Yes.
that's the
Yeah.
issue that comes. This scenes had to be cut, but it leaves some things being a little bit weird. Like the Tunnel of Love mission from Ares is cut,
Hmm.
which just makes Ares' a presence even more suspicious than it is in the book.
Yeah.
Because he legitimately just comes in and helps them, asking
Hmm.
nothing in return, and that's so suspicious. At least in the graphic novel, like, well, he's using them for this, and he'll give them something in return.
Right.
So there's some other things they cut. A lot of what makes Annabeth an interesting character.
Yes.
Um, she doesn't get her moment with Cerberus, where she figures out how to kind of tame
Squeaky
and
toe.
move on. That we don't get no, we don't get as much of her earlier on, in the camp with the capture the flag thing. We don't really get
Hmm.
as much of her plan, as you get in the book. So, and I mean, all of the characters kind of lose a lot of what makes them special because we're racing through this 400-page book in 150 graphic novel pages.
Hmm.
So it's tough to do, um, but I do think that it really makes it hard for this to stand on its own.
Agreed. Yeah. As someone who's very active on the internet at the time, the love for like fan art of Percy Jackson, for seeing these characters come to life, was so prevalent in the community. So I can definitely see where the graphic novel like made sense as a let's adapt this and put it out. Because I'm sure that picked up in droves. I think you're right that it's not something to read on your own. Like it's not for a lot of times people give graphic novels to kids who like are having trouble reading or transitioning into full novels.
Yeah,
This is not one of those books. Like
no,
the audience of this is not someone new to Percy Jackson, which I think is a bummer because Percy Jackson is so appealing. As like a story and most importantly as a character. I think an interesting thing that we see when we move on to like the Son of Neptune in the second series is seeing the way that other people perceive Percy, and obviously that's a much older Percy, but he's
yeah,
so badass, he's so powerful, and I think part of the way that you're able to get to that transition is because in those first five books, it's Percy reporting on himself, and he's like, "I don't know what I'm doing," uh, and then he succeeds.
yeah.
But like
I
in
mean,
the
I think it's
graphic
true in the
novel,
first book he doesn't know what he's doing. The first book is
for
very
sure.
much him bumbling his way through as a incompetent little 12-year-old.
I mean, certainly, but there is also that amount of power there, like commanding the toilets to push Clarice back, or the fountain grabbing uh, Nancy in front of the museum.
Yeah, but it's like
These are
it's
all
raw,
like
unfocused power, which is I think like the way that it
mhm.
comes across in the book. Anyway, keep going.
That's super fair, but I feel like we lose something when uh in a visual medium we kind of see what's happening, I guess, because it's like, oh, the water grabbed Nancy, and you can see people reacting to that, but it's it just doesn't have the same effect. I think you hit the nail on
Yeah,
the head with this being a very hard story to adapt, uh, because so much of it relies on a blind lack of understanding, and that lack of understanding is not as charming when you feel like more alone in not understanding what's going on.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but you also
Let
mentioned
me,
that there are
yeah,
a number of scenes that are cut. which is a bummer. Like, I understand why you need to have the Lotus Casino in there because that accounts for, a number of days going
Yeah.
missing. But it felt too quick in there. It didn't feel like there was the Lotus magic happening at all. I feel like that one was
No, they
put in
get
there
in and
for
out so fast.
utility, which
Yeah.
felt kind of lame. Uh,
There's no conversation where Percy realizes that somebody else like has the U wrong or anything. He
yeah,
kind of just looks at like Annabeth playing this game and being like, "No, there can't be an architecture game. Nobody's that lame but Annabeth. Let's get out of here."
which like he's not wrong about, but also, uh, I loved that there was like the little what was Grover's? It was like polluter shooter or something.
Yeah, I mean that's mentioned
Those were
in the
cute
book
little
too, right? Yeah.
details. Um, to actually have added in. I do think there was a missed opportunity not to give a little Nico D'Angelo Easter egg, since he was trapped in the Lotus Hotel for so long. Uh, Clearly, they should have had a little emo kid in a corner with his Mytho Magic
Hmm.
cards. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, it just felt like that entire scene was kind of
Yeah.
disappointing because it was so quick, and they
Yeah.
really
I mean the whole book's
didn't
really really quick.
exactly, which is kind of to be expected with something that you're trying to make very approachable to the same demographic that would be reading Percy Jackson. But I don't think they chose what scenes to keep and cut with any sort of importance. Or I guess they chose them. I wouldn't have chosen in the way that they did, because we also don't see Percy get his Medusa head, which obviously is important for Sally when she freezes Gabe and sells.
That whole thing was cut out. Like that.
Yeah.
There was no thing at the end either. There. Yeah.
Which also has a Grover moment in it, if I'm remembering correctly, because it's been 10 years, but I've read the books a number of times. Because Grover's like, oh, look at all these statues. Because
It's
didn't
his
he
Uncle
have a
Ferdinand.
relative? Yeah,
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 Uncle
yeah.
Ferdinand. Yeah.
And like it feels like we just lost a lot of the characterization moments for a number of these characters.
Yeah.
That's a
Yeah.
bummer because the characters are the strongest part of this.
I agree. I'm gonna get to maybe my biggest criticism in a bit, but
Mhm.
let me shed some positivity.
For sure.
Um, yeah. I say that and then I'm gonna start with a slight negative, but I'll get into the positive of it. But the first thing is the art style isn't really my favorite. I don't really love the look of the characters. That being said, it is consistent with the original fan art for the characters and kind of the vibe that they had. I feel like it's in that same vein. Um, I don't love it. I didn't love it there either. But what I will say, is that there's certain moments in which the action is done really well. And it really
Hmm.
depends on how much time is given to it. Like there's sequences where it's like you have to do action in 3 panels, and it's like, well, can't do that, so I'm just gonna do my best, and that's really not the fault of the artist. So I'm not gonna give
Yeah,
them the criticism. But there's moments where, and I'm gonna talk about the Ares fight in
I was
particular,
gonna say
where I'm
the
like,
Ares fight.
this is bringing to life something that I loved in the comic, and something that I loved in the novel, and as a
Hmm.
fan of the novel, there are moments like that throughout the book that, as a fan of the novel, I think this is still really enjoyable because you're like,
Oh
everything's
yeah,
coming to life, it's cool, and it's here, and that Ares fight is the culmination of it, and um, and that's kind of let me get to my big criticism because I'm gonna tie in it. It's because that becomes the like conclusion of the book essentially because
right.
the Luke conclusion is cut completely. And that is, I think, the weakest point of this. We get told Luke is the lightning thief. There's no betrayal.
Yeah.
There's no turn. There's no poisoning Percy. There's no. We get told in one page by Chiron that Luke was the lightning thief and that Luke turned on them and then he left. And it's like that falls flat.
Agreed. Um, Especially because like looking to the conclusion of the series, Luke is such an important character to that
Oh yeah,
conclusion. And specifically Luke's like kind of sense of free will is very important to that as well when, uh
yeah,
and
yeah,
um yeah, it was really really missing. It just feels like they were a bit too utilitarian with what they chose to keep. I think they could have gotten away with like shortening the timeline a bit more or kind of jumping over certain things uh, that are less like plot important, I guess, to replace it with ones that are more character important. Um,
Yeah, it's tough because like I wanna give them a little bit of leeway. Where I'm like, I don't know what you do cut looking at it because like I'm mad about the things that were cut, but overall like they weren't maybe necessary for the plot. But then like you can't cut the Lotus Hotel because that really breaks the story. You can't cut Medusa because that kind of really breaks the story. You can't cut the arc, bridge that he falls off of because that's really important to the story. You
mhm,
can't cut the meeting with Hades because that's ridiculously important to the story. Like it's really hard to figure out what you are gonna cut. Maybe it's just that things need to be paced a little bit faster in the beginning,
mhm.
because it does
Yeah, I
feel like the
don't think you
beginning
needed
gets
it
more
so
time than
much
the
in the
ending.
museum.
Yeah, yeah. Like it feels like the first maybe I don't know, like 60 pages of this book. I think it's a 130-page book. The first like 60, it feels like get a lot more time to breathe than the second 60. It almost feels like they
Mhm.
were writing and they realized they were like halfway to what they were allotted and they were like, "Well, we need to move
Guess we're gonna
faster
keep
now."
this.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I think maybe a more balanced pacing would benefit it, but I'm not
Mhm.
going to sit here and pretend like I have the answers because it's a hard
Right.
thing to adapt.
And that's the tricky thing with adaptation. And as a little spoiler, we might get into that a little more uh, in the next segment. Um, but it's so tricky to decide what is important when kind of everything is important for something. Like when something is well written the way that the Lightning Thief is, most of the scenes are going to either add plot value or character value or like be particularly funny, which makes them very beloved, which makes it hard to cut for an adaptation because people want to see these important scenes. um, and it's really a tough task, and I commend them for what they were able to do, but I do think there were a number of places where they just kind of missed the mark. For me, as
Yeah,
a fan of Percy Jackson, who, as we mentioned, is kind of the fan base for this graphic novel.
yeah. No, I fully agree with you. Gonna throw a little more positivity in here because more moments that I love. The interaction with Hades, I think, is really cool. I
Hmm.
like the way that Hades looks. I like the way that his like skeleton, like goons look. I think
Yes.
that was a good, well adapted moment that worked really well. And then the moment in which the elevator goes up to Mount Olympus, that splash
Hmm.
page
Yeah.
is gorgeous, and it makes me just immediately go like, "Oh, that's what it looks like when the elevator goes up." I'm cool with
Right.
that. I love that. Not explained in the book, but you did a great job giving me a visual that now in my head is going to be the way that it works whenever I reread that book,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. I think that was done really well. I think a lot of I liked a lot of the character designs. Like the Ares design is not exactly what I had in my head for Ares. Like I was pictured with a bigger beard and stuff, like a little more Greek goddish. But I really liked a lot of the visuals for them. I really liked Poseidon's design. I think that they captured the dad energy very well. Um, I didn't realize how
Yeah.
weird it was going to be to see uh, the Chiron design because centaurs are weird and like
Yeah.
that's just
Much easier to read
unavoidable.
about them than, like, look at them.
Exactly. Especially when he was walking out of his wheelchair, I was like, "Oh my
Yeah.
goodness!" In like a good way. It was
Yeah.
good and fun. Um, I really enjoyed Grover's character design, especially at the end when he's like in full satyr form. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, I really enjoyed the character designs. I think the art is, um, I think it's decent. I didn't have really a problem with it. Uh, I enjoyed a number of the character designs as they are, as well as the art on the page, like we talked about the Ares fight.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I thought it was pretty solid. I liked it quite a bit. I think there were a lot of really cool backgrounds going on. But yeah,
Yeah.
I enjoyed reading this. I certainly had some qualms with it, but nothing that made me say I would never give this to someone else. Like if I
Yeah.
had
Yeah.
a kid cousin who just read Percy Jackson, I'd be like, "Oh, here you go, a visual. novel
yeah.
version.
I'm gonna throw something out just because I'm looking at like the moment where Ares like comes in right before the fight, and I didn't realize it on my first read, but I'm realizing it looking at it right now. He looks so much like Negan from The Walking Dead. It's kind of wild. Very strange, little point to throw in there, but notice that
Is it
he's fairly
just
in
the
line with
bat
what I
on the
probably would have.
shoulder?
Yeah, yeah, the bat on the shoulder and like the wide figure, the coat, and
Yeah.
like the like it's a very similar vibe. I feel like, but anyway, um, yeah, I feel like I like the overall like designs and sense of the way I feel like it's very true to what the
Hmm.
book said. Um, and like I feel like this is one of the constant things when people like look at the episode. It's like they don't look enough like Greek gods. I'm like they're never described in the book as actually looking like Greek gods outside of maybe like Hades and Zeus. Like the rest of them are usually described like Poseidon's described as like a fisherman. Ares is described as looking like a pro wrestler. Like they don't usually get that like in their humanish forms, like
For
goddish
sure.
description, but we impart it on there because it's what we are, like
Right.
feeling like. So I think it's valid, but I think that they do a good job of actually translating what's on the
Agreed.
page
Yeah.
to the image.
Like I had zero
Yeah,
problem with Ares'
yeah,
design.
yeah.
Um, yeah. So are we ready to hop into ratings and top
Yeah,
tens?
I'm happy to hop into ratings. Yeah, I think I've hit on most everything. Like I said, the art, I like the motion in the art, and I like the overall design of the art, but like the
Hmm.
way that faces kind of look and just kind of the vibe of it isn't super my favorite art style, which hurts it a little bit. Adapting's hard. It's really hard to talk about the writing in adaptation because like half of it's from the original writer and half of it's from
Right.
Robert Venditti, and the pacing's all over the place. So it's a tough thing to really discuss in that sense. That being said, it's if I was looking at this as like an original book, it would probably be much lower than like looking at it as like a
Yes.
companion to Percy Jackson. Me being like, I'm a Percy Jackson fan. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed sitting here and being like, oh man, that's that and
Same.
that's that and that's that. And what are they keeping? What? So I get that fan enjoyment out of it. So I'm gonna put it up a little bit. I'll just give the rating now, and then we can do our top tens at the end. I gave it a 6 out of 10. That is where it sits at me because it's enjoyable for me. You know,
That is super fair. It was enjoyable for me too, but I certainly had my share of problems with it, both as a comic reader and as a Percy Jackson fan. Uh, I rocked it in at a 4.5. I don't know that any part of it was strong enough to justify pushing it over that average mark. Um, but it was fun, but certainly not a standalone read, if that's what you're
fully
looking
agree.
for.
Do you want to get into our new and improved top 10 lists? Um,
Let's do it. You want
yeah,
to start us
okay. I'll
off?
start. Yeah, I'll start us off. Still sitting at the cream of the crop, the top of the top is going to be Nocterra Volume 1 at a 9 out of 10. Rocking in right below it is going to be Dark Crisis on Infinite Earths at an 8.5 out of 10. Followed by Radiant Black Volume 1 at an 8 out of 10. Savage Dragon Baptism Fire sits at number 4 with a 7 out of 10. Chicken Devil Volume 1 sits at number 5 at a 6.5 out of 10. Percy Jackson the Lightning Thief comes in at number 6 at a 6 out of 10. And at number 7 is Paper Girls Volume 1 at a 5.5 out of 10.
Well, I don't keep track of my numbers because, frankly, I have no good criteria for my numbers, so they're mostly
Yeah,
arbitrary.
yeah.
My
And
top
they're all
10,
arbitrary.
they're all arbitrary. My top 10, number 1, Nocterra, Full Throttle Dark. Number 2, Chicken Devil, Under Pressure. Tied for number 3, Radiant Black Volume 1 and Paper Girls Volume 1. Number 4, Dark Crisis on Infinite Earths. Number 5, Savage Dragon Baptism of Fire. And coming in at number 6 is going to be this Lightning Thief adaptation.
I'm gonna come at you a little bit for no good reason. I'm gonna make fun of you. When there's a tie for number 3, the next number is number 5, not number 4.
Well, take it up with our Google Doc that automatically numbers the lines.
Oh, that's why it's like okay, fair play. I don't know why I decided to make that about, but I wanted to say it. Do we want to? I'm so sorry. Do we want to move on to
Someone's
the
been
creator
touched by
corner?
Kronos, the darkness
Yeah,
in his
yeah.
heart.
No, Ares
But
is
yes,
around, so I'm overly aggressive.
let's move on to the creator corner. All right, here we are in the creator corner where we sit back, relax, talk about being writers, talk about making comics, Kickstarter highlights, all that good stuff. This week, to tie into our back issue review, I would love for us to talk about adapting for comic books. I mean, I feel
I
like you could have seen this coming.
yeah. I didn't really think about it, but I probably would have if I thought about it for more than 2 minutes. But let
I
me
know
let
you'd
me
like
let
to
me
be
throw just
surprised.
an immediate question back because the way that I feel, I hate adapting. Like I do it a lot. I hate it. I don't know how you feel about it. To me, it's such a like grindy, less
Mhm.
creative. Like it's not fun. Like is my vibe. I don't know how you feel about it, so I want to just throw it immediately back and see how you feel about it.
No, I certainly hear you on that. I think we've both had quite a few instances as freelance writers of people approaching us and saying, "All right, I want a comic book, and I want it to be based on my novel." And I'm like,
My novel or my
"Ah,
screenplay, both of those
exactly."
happen so frequently. And let me like predispose this before like we look at something like or not before, but like versus looking at something like the Percy Jackson book. Like the thing in doing it in this freelance space is you're working with people who aren't professionals, which isn't like not meant to be like a slight or anything, but they don't have as easy a time, especially when they are directly paying you to do it. They don't have as easy of a time like letting go of things. So
Hmm.
it doesn't become can you condense and actually adapt this into a solid it's like can you turn this into a graphic novel whilst cutting nothing,
Yeah.
which ends up with this 150 page novel is now a 450-page graphic novel if you can't cut a single word or a single
Hmm.
moment. And that is a slog to sit there and go, 1 page of novel, here's 2 pages of comic or 3 pages of comic. It moves so slow. You'll have an entire like issue of a comic book that's just like one, like location and one, like I had one that was literally just in like somebody's apartment and it was
Hmm.
literally just that that can be so frustrating, and that's
Oh
why
yeah.
I feel so like bogged down by it. It's not the idea of it in general. If I had
Hmm.
more freedom or more of an opportunity to actually just read it and go, here are the important moments and here's the important bits, and we'll keep the spirit and we'll keep the story, but we'll actually turn it into a graphic novel, I think that would be more, collaborative and fun.
Hmm. Yeah, and that brings me to a more specific question for you. When adapting a novel or a screenplay or something, or even from a movie, I suppose, what do you think are scenes that work in other mediums that don't work in comic books?
Really long conversations.
Hmm.
Like you can't just have back and forth dialogue because it takes up more spaces in a comic is the issue. Like
Hmm.
if two characters talk back and forth like say 10 lines each in, a movie you can get that done in like under or like a minute or something and then you just move on and like that's fine. In a comic book, that back and forth, like that's pages of
Yeah.
content. So you really have to start going, okay, what are the important things accomplished in this dialogue? Let's take out some of the style, let's take out some of the
Hmm.
like long-windedness, and let's pare it down to the important moments and make it maybe so they only talk back and forth 5 times,
Hmm. Yeah,
or you
there's a
just have a page
really
covering dialogue.
yeah, there's a really great uh single page in Matt Fraction and David Aja's Hawkeye where Clint and Kate are going back and forth with each other. And it's like, I think it might actually be a 12 page or a 12 panel page, but like that serves the conversation so well. But that's
Yeah,
because of where it lands in the story and the relationship between those characters. It makes sense there to do it. And it's not
yeah,
something that you can't do in comics. But when you look at the way that you're experiencing that conversation, let's just say on screen, it is something where you're really connecting with the emotions of the actors and the way they're delivering the lines is so important. And obviously,
yeah.
artists are incredibly talented so often with essentially being actors in their own right when they're drawing these characters.
I've
Uh,
used that. I think I use that idea a lot. I think the idea
mhm,
of looking at writer like a direct, like you want to like pare it down like writer like a director and then artist like actors
mhm.
is a really, I think that's the easiest way to compare the mediums. They're very different mediums, so it's not a
Right.
direct comparison, but I think that's the easiest way. Anyway.
Right, but even so, yeah, you really have to make sure you're picking out what's important, and in a long-winded conversation, the entire conversation probably isn't important. You're probably building to something, or talking between the lines, and you really got to be able to pick out what will make that effective on a single
Yeah.
page instead of 4 pages.
Yeah, and the other thing, like looking at the example that you use from Hawkeye, is in freelancing. We're sitting here, we're freelancers. We're going to talk about it from the way that we do it. You're not going to write a 12-panel page. You're
No.
just not, because one, it's going to take way more of your time per page, and you're not getting paid great. So that time to do a 12-panel page instead of doing 2 other pages is going to be, not good for you. And two, you don't know what artist is picking up this book. A lot of times we're hired before an artist is on board. You have no idea what artist this is going to. You don't know what their style is going to look like. You don't know what their strengths are going to be or what their weaknesses are going to be. You don't know how many panels they're going to be willing to do per page. So if you sit there and you drop a 12-panel page,
I think importantly, you
you
also
don't know
don't
if
have
it's
a
gonna
mode of communication between you and the artist.
Yeah.
Most of the time with freelancing, you send off your script and you don't have that kind of communication, that back and forth with your artist, since, now it's kind of their turn. So that's something that really hurts it in a freelance space as well.
No, absolutely. And that's why I think that you can't really do that in what we do versus something like that.
Right.
But it's definitely something where like long-winded conversations can happen, but it's just when you're working on adapting and they're constant and they're there and you can't make sure that it works in the context, like it can really hurt you in that sense. As well as really long-winded action sequences can.
That's what I was about to say,
yeah. When you're adapting, you really like keeping the spirit of a battle is way more important than doing it like moment for moment, shot for shot. Like if you try to do it shot for shot, a 2-minute action sequence is going to take you like 8 pages, if you want every single moment to happen, because everything has to be still framed,
Right.
And
so
like
if
instead
you look
you
at
want to capture the spirit of like back and forth, and do like, okay, here was this 3-minute fight scene in a screenplay, we're going to do that in 6 panels on this page, and then we'll move on to the next page,
And I think you can see a bit of the reversal of that. I'm thinking specifically of like Dragon Ball Z being released over here in America before the like manga was caught up to it, where they would take
I didn't know
these.
that.
Yeah. So they would release the anime over here as it was being made, but the manga wasn't caught up yet, and they needed to pad out that time. So they would take these, small chunks of pages that were these battles and would
Is
blow
that why
them
like they
into
have episodes that are like all like 2 minutes long, like in actual like time and universe, and like the whole episode?
And it's literally
That's why
just
that's
bombastic fighting, because that's something that you can draw out so much more in film and animation and other media.
Yeah,
But
I think you
before
have a
we
lot more
wind,
leash with action in moving media than you do in comics. Like,
oh yeah,
90s removed, people get bored of action if it's just action for 20 pages of a comic book. You can do probably 20 minutes or 10 minutes at the very least of, action in a movie or a TV show, or especially in an animation, and people aren't going to be like, why are we not doing anything else? People be like, no, this is cool. We keep seeing these things, move. And anyway.
But I think an important thing before we wind down here on our creative corner is that comics are kind of inherently an adaptive medium, though. Like if you look at the way that Batman, Superman, Spider-Man have continued to come out over the years, it's people's adaptations of those original characters. What is something you think is either a really great example of how to adapt an established character, or maybe it's something where you're like, oh, you're really missing the mark on here?
It's so tough because I'm gonna just drop the big 2 off the face of the map when talking about adaptation, because it's so different. Because they adapt like ideas and characters. There's no straight adaptations really, except in animation. There's some in animation, but like when you're talking about
in other comics.
Like adapting.
I mean that comics, you as a comic artist who pick up Batman right now, like Jason Aaron picking up Batman for Batman Offworld, that's not his character. He has this body of work
Yeah,
to
that's
be
not really
basing his
adapting, though.
character.
That's
But it's
continuing.
not adapting.
It's not adapting. Adapting is, like, I think the definition of adapting is changing the medium or changing. So, like, you are adapting it then. It's more of a remake. It's like, making the same movie again isn't an adaptation. It's a remake, It's more of that style. But stepping onto an existing character is an interesting idea. And it's why we have so many issues, I think, in adapting, like, big two characters. Because, like, this is or isn't comic. It's like, there's a million different comic creators, like maybe it was accurate to this guy's run, but it's not accurate to this guy's run. The one point I want to make on this, because I do find it very funny how much more receptive people are to, like, a new idea introduced in a comic versus introduced in a movie. It's like, if the movie wants to go and do their new thing with the character, it's like, no. But if it's based on a comic book run that came out in 2018, which is also like a brand new take, it's like, no, now it's okay because it happened in the comic book. So, but that person also had nothing to do with the original, people. The main thing I'll say is, this is why I love indie comics, because you can have, like, one, or you can at least have, like, a guiding light. And I'm gonna give you the best example of this. A universe that was able to take things so different from the OG is the IDW Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle comics. They're on at like 147, but I'll talk about the first 100 issues, because those, I think, are so well beloved by everybody as being, like, one of the best redos or new takes on established characters. And here's the thing. I mean, beyond the exceedingly talented artists, writers, and everybody who was there, absolutely important. Don't take anything away from that. But one of the things that allows that to do new ideas but still be so true is that one of the original creators is there overseeing it. Kevin Eastman was there every step of the way to make sure that things were still, in the spirit of it. So there has to be a respect, and I think that when you can have that voice and you listen to that voice of an original, creator, it's the same thing now with, like, you want to talk about another medium, about, like, Rick Riordan being so involved in the Percy Jackson TV show. Even changes are going to be more well received by fans because that the original, creator has a say in those changes, and it's not being done against their intent. It's being done within their intent to do something that's still true and, authentic.
Yeah. I think that's a pretty good insight. Obviously, with a character like Batman or Superman or Spider-Man, who no longer has that tie to their original creator because it's been 80, 85 years, that obviously becomes a bit muddier. And that's where I think you get more into the adaptation sphere, where it's like, okay, we are taking this and doing our own thing with it. And I don't know, I think it's really neat that comics do have that continued legacy. Perhaps we as comic fans sometimes are a bit vocal or harsh with our responses to adaptation, whether in comic books or other places.
Don't head back to the last time we discussed an issue of Mainline Titans. Maybe don't go there.
In any case,
don't watch that episode.
In any case, yeah, in any case, I think that's going to bring us to the end of the Creator Corner. Adaptation is tricky and sticky, whether it's working directly with the original creator, and whether or not that original creator is a professional or someone hiring you on the internet. But it's the beauty of the comics and all that good stuff.
An adaptation can create some of the greatest pieces of, art when everything marries in the perfect way. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of the Script Heroes podcast.
Well, I just got claimed by one of the big three, so I'm gonna leave this cabin.
Like, you're cool enough to be one of the big three. Be more like Hermes or something shitty like that.
Well, your ass would be unclaimed, so...
Rude. Join us next week, where our polls will include Beast World Tour Atlantis, Giant Robot Hellboy number 3, and The Hunger and the Dusk number 5.
And our back issue review is going to be Batman and Robin Volume 1 by Frank Whiteley and Grant Morrison. Subscribe to be the first to know when the episode drops.
We'll see you next week, Comic Geeks. Let me be a little stupid.
if I wasn't going to let you be a little stupid, I don't think we'd be friends anymore.